The vast space station floated quietly in the dark expanse of the galaxy, its lights flickering against the endless black. The human delegation had been on board for nearly 3 days, negotiating trade deals with the Zalinari, a species so advanced that their technology seemed almost magical. The Zalinari had been observing Earth for years, offering help and resources. But many people had started to question their true intentions. Were they really here to help, or was there something else? Captain Alyssa Rhodes, head of the human delegation, stood in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. She wasn't just a leader of people. She was also a mother. Her son, Ethan, stood beside her, nervous and excited at the same time. This was his first official mission with the delegation, and he couldn't help but be amazed by everything. The station itself was a wonder, gleaming walls, towering structures, and alien designs unlike anything on Earth. But today, something was different. Today, the Zalinari Queen herself was arriving. The doors to the observation room opened, and the first whispers of the Queen's presence spread like a wave through the air. It was said that she was as beautiful as she was dangerous, with powers that no one could truly understand. Alyssa had never met her personally, but she had heard stories. The Queen ruled over the Zalinari people with an iron fist, and her word was law. "Captain Rhodes, the Queen's ship is docked," an officer said, his voice filled with awe. Alyssa nodded, her eyes narrowing. She had to remain calm and composed. There was a lot at stake here, perhaps too much. The space station seemed to hold its breath as the Queen's ship glided into the docking bay. It was a massive craft, a mix of sleek metal and organic design that seemed to grow like a living creature. The ship was surrounded by a soft glow, and it exuded an aura of power that made everyone in the room uneasy. As the door to the docking bay opened, a figure stepped out. She was taller than any human, with skin that shimmered like moonlight. Her eyes glowed a piercing violet, and her long, flowing hair seemed to move with a mind of its own. The Queen wore a regal, flowing gown made of materials that seemed to shift and change as she moved. Her presence was so overwhelming that even Alyssa, a seasoned commander, felt a chill run down her spine. Behind the Queen walked several of her guards, their faces hidden behind dark helmets, their bodies armored in sleek, silvery material. They stood tall and intimidating, making no sound as they moved. The Queen's gaze swept across the room, and it felt as though she was looking into the very soul of everyone present. When her eyes landed on Ethan, however, she paused. Ethan felt the weight of her gaze. His heart raced, and he could feel his palms growing sweaty. He had never been in the presence of such power, and for the first time, he truly understood what it meant to feel small. The Queen smiled slightly, though it was not a comforting smile. It was the kind of smile that made you feel like you were about to be devoured. "You," she said, her voice like honey, but with an edge of steel, "you will be mine." The room fell silent. Alyssa blinked, certain she had misunderstood. The Queen had not been speaking to her. She was looking directly at Ethan, her violet eyes fixed on him as if he were the only person in the room. "What?" Alyssa began, but the Queen raised a hand, silencing her. "You, the youngest of the humans." The Queen continued, her voice cutting through the tension in the air. "I have chosen you to be my mate." Ethan's eyes widened. His mouth went dry. This couldn't be happening. It was one thing to hear stories of the Zalinari Queen's power, but it was another thing entirely to be the subject of her interest. "No," Alyssa said firmly, stepping forward. "This is not what we came here for. You cannot." The Queen's gaze turned sharp, and for a moment, Alyssa felt as though the temperature in the room dropped several degrees. She took a step back, suddenly aware of how small she felt in the face of the Queen's overwhelming presence. "I can," the Queen said coldly, her voice no longer soft. "And I will." She turned to one of her guards and nodded. The guard immediately moved to stand beside Ethan, his expression hidden behind a mask. But his intentions clear. Ethan was to be taken. The Queen would have him. Alyssa's heart raced as she looked at her son. He was still frozen, not knowing how to react. This wasn't just an offer. It was an order, and the Zalinari had never been known to back down from their decisions. Alyssa's military training kicked in, and she took a deep breath. "Ethan, stay calm," she said softly. "We'll find a way out of this." But as the guards began to move toward Ethan, the room suddenly filled with a low hum. A voice echoed throughout the station, a message from the Zalinari leadership. The Queen turned her attention toward the announcement, and Alyssa saw her chance. She grabbed Ethan's arm, pulling him toward the exit. But before they could move, the Queen snapped her fingers. Without a word, the doors to the room slammed shut, locking them in. The guards, now blocking the only exit, raised their weapons. It was clear that there would be no escape, not without a fight. "Mother, what do we do?" Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. Alyssa's mind raced. She had never faced anything like this. The Zalinari were not just powerful, they were unpredictable. And now, the Queen had made her choice. She had chosen her mate, and it was her way or no way. "We find another way," Alyssa said, her voice more determined than she felt. "We won't let her take you." But deep down, she knew this wasn't going to be easy. The Zalinari were not like any other alien race they had encountered. They had a deep respect for power and conquest, and the Queen's word was law. If they were to survive, they would need more than just bravery. They would need strategy. As the Queen's voice echoed through the room, promising Ethan a place by her side, Alyssa realized just how dangerous this mission had become. She had to protect her son not just from the Queen's gaze, but from the entire Zalinari Empire. Ethan glanced at his mother, his face a mix of confusion and fear. "You think we can stop her?" Alyssa met his gaze, her expression firm. "I don't know yet, but we have to try." The Queen's laughter echoed in the distance. As if she knew something they didn't, the game had begun, and it was up to the humans to find a way to win. Ethan felt his heart race as the Queen's guards moved toward him. They were not like anything he had seen before. Tall and imposing, they seemed to glide, their armor shining under the artificial lights. The room felt cold and empty, the silence broken only by the distant hum of the space station's engines. The Queen stood before him, her gaze never leaving his face. It was as if she could see straight through him, and for a moment, he wondered if she could read his thoughts. Ethan tried to steady his breathing, to push away the panic that threatened to rise in his chest. His mother, Captain Alyssa Rhodes, was beside him, her hand firm on his arm. She looked calm on the outside, but Ethan could see the worry in her eyes. She had always been the strong one, the leader, the protector. But now, it was clear that this situation was beyond anything either of them had imagined. "We don't have to do this," Alyssa said, her voice low but determined. "We'll find a way out. I'll make sure you're safe." Ethan nodded, though the words didn't bring him any comfort. He didn't want to be a prisoner here, not in this strange, cold place. He didn't want to be taken by the Queen, forced into a life he didn't understand. But there was no easy way out. The guards were closing in, and the door behind them was sealed shut. The Queen stepped closer, her eyes never leaving Ethan's. She didn't need to speak. Her presence alone was enough to command attention. When she finally did speak, her voice was soft but carried an undeniable authority. "You are mine," she said. "You will come with me, and together we will rule." Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't just stand there and accept her words. He wasn't some prize to be won. He wasn't a trophy to be displayed. He was a human, and humans weren't meant to bow to anyone. "No," Ethan said, his voice surprisingly steady. "I'm not going with you." The Queen raised an eyebrow, as if she had never expected such resistance. "You dare defy me?" Her tone was still calm, but there was an edge of danger in her words. "I do," Ethan replied. Taking a step back, he could feel his body tensing, the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He didn't know what he was going to do next, but he had to do something. He wasn't going to just let this alien queen take control of his life. The Queen's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Then you will learn the cost of defiance." With a snap of her fingers, two of her guards moved toward Ethan, their hands reaching for him. Alyssa immediately stepped in front of her son, her eyes blazing with a fierceness Ethan had never seen before. "You will not take him," Alyssa said, her voice cold and firm. "If you want him, you'll have to go through me." The Queen looked at her with a mixture of amusement and disdain. "You think you can stop me, human?" she asked. "You think you can stop me from taking what I want?" Alyssa didn't flinch. "I'm not going to let you take my son, Queen Lyria. We're leaving. And you're not going to stop us." The Queen's smile faltered for a moment, and Ethan could see the flicker of something like annoyance in her eyes. But then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by the cold, calculating look she had worn when she first arrived. "I will give you one chance," the Queen said. "One chance to change your mind before I make things difficult." Alyssa didn't respond, but her hand tightened on Ethan's arm. They weren't backing down. The Queen might have been powerful, but they weren't going to let her take control of their lives. The tension in the room thickened, and Ethan could feel his pulse quicken. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to give up without a fight. The Queen's guards stepped back, seemingly waiting for their mistress's command. But Ethan didn't wait. He quickly turned and ran toward the side of the room, his mind racing. The guards would be fast, but maybe, just maybe, he could escape. Ethan. His mother called after him, but he didn't stop. His mind was focused on one thing: getting out. He reached the wall and pressed his hand against the cool surface, hoping to find some way to open the door or trigger an escape. His fingers skimmed over the strange markings on the wall, his heart pounding in his chest. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but he had to find something, anything. Behind him, he heard the sound of footsteps. The guards were closing in, and the door was still sealed. There was no way out, but then something unexpected happened. A soft voice, low and urgent, reached his ears. "Ethan," the voice said. "I can help you." Ethan froze. He turned quickly, his eyes searching for the source of the voice. There, standing in the shadows, was a figure. A tall woman, with silver skin and dark eyes. She wasn't one of the Queen's guards, but she wasn't human either. She was Zalinari, but she didn't look like the others. She had an air of quiet rebellion about her, as though she was out of place among the Queen's loyal followers. "I'm Zara," the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been waiting for someone like you." "Someone like me?" Ethan repeated, confused. "What do you mean?" Zara's gaze flickered toward the Queen, who was still watching from the center of the room. "The Queen isn't what she appears to be," Zara said. "I used to serve her, but I've seen enough. I want to help you escape." Ethan's eyes widened. This was his chance. But he couldn't just trust a stranger, could he? "I don't know," Ethan said slowly. "Why would you help me?" Zara stepped closer, her voice urgent. "Because the Queen is lying to you. She doesn't care about you. She wants to control you. And if you don't leave now, it will be too late." Ethan glanced at his mother. Alyssa was still standing her ground, facing down the Queen's guards. She was waiting for him to make a move, to decide whether to stay or run. Without thinking, Ethan nodded. "Okay, help me." Zara smiled, and in an instant, she was at his side. She pressed a small device into his hand, a strange, glowing object. "Use this," she whispered. "It will help you open the door. But you need to move quickly." Ethan didn't waste a second. He pressed the device to the wall, and a soft beep sounded. Slowly, the door began to slide open, revealing the dark hallway beyond. "Go," Zara urged. Now, with one last glance at his mother, Ethan ran toward the open door. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing: he wasn't going to let the Queen have him. Ethan's heart raced as he sprinted down the dimly lit hallway, the sound of his footsteps echoing off the cold metal walls. Zara, the mysterious Zalinari who had helped him escape, was just ahead, guiding him through the twisting corridors of the alien ship. Ethan couldn't help but feel a mix of fear and excitement. He was running for his life, but something about Zara's quiet confidence made him believe they had a chance. "Keep up," Zara whispered, her voice barely audible. "We don't have much time." Ethan nodded, glancing back over his shoulder. He could still feel the weight of the Queen's eyes on him, even though he couldn't see her. The Zalinari guards had been quick to respond to his escape, and he knew they wouldn't stop until they had him back. But for now, he was free, at least for a moment. They turned a corner, and Zara stopped in front of a large, metallic door. She tapped a series of symbols on a panel beside it, and the door slowly slid open with a hiss. Ethan followed her into the room, which was filled with strange alien technology. It looked like a mix of high-tech machines and ancient artifacts, all glowing with an eerie light. "This is the heart of the ship," Zara said, turning to face Ethan. "The Queen's personal control center. From here, she commands everything." Ethan looked around, his eyes wide. "This is where she controls the ship? How did you get in here?" Zara smiled, though there was a sadness in her eyes. "I used to be one of her trusted servants. But that was before I saw the truth. The Queen's rule is built on lies, manipulation, and fear. She's not the savior she claims to be. She's the one who's been holding back her people's true potential." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean? Why would she do that?" Zara's expression hardened. "Power. The Queen has always craved more power. She doesn't care about the Zalinari people. She only cares about controlling them. She keeps them in line by making them believe they need her. But the truth is, they don't." Ethan's mind was spinning. He had never imagined anything like this. He had always believed the Zalinari were an advanced and powerful species. But hearing Zara's words made him realize just how little he understood about them. "But why help me?" Ethan asked. "You could be punished for this. The Queen doesn't forgive betrayal." Zara's eyes darkened, and her voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm not the only one who feels this way. There are others. People who want change, who want to break free from the Queen's rule. But we need someone to lead us. Someone who isn't afraid to stand up to her." Ethan took a deep breath. He had never thought of himself as a leader. He was just a young man from Earth, who had found himself in the middle of an alien empire's struggle for power. But as he looked at Zara, he realized something important. He couldn't just run away. He had to do something. He had to fight for something more than his own freedom. "Okay," Ethan said, his voice steady. "What do we need to do?" Zara's eyes brightened. "First, we need to disable the Queen's control over the ship. If we can take away her ability to command the fleet, she'll lose the support of her followers. They'll see her for what she really is. How do we do that?" Ethan asked, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Zara pointed to a large console in the center of the room, surrounded by holographic displays and glowing lights. "That's the ship's main control system. If we can hack into it, we can shut down the Queen's command access. It won't be easy. The system is protected by layers of security, but I know how to get past them." Ethan nodded. "Let's do it." As Zara moved toward the console, Ethan watched her fingers fly over the controls with ease. She worked quickly, her eyes focused and intense. Ethan could sense the urgency in her movements. They didn't have much time. The Queen's guards were sure to be searching for them by now, and the longer they stayed in the heart of the ship, the more dangerous it would become. "How long will this take?" Ethan asked, his voice tight with tension. "Just a few more minutes," Zara replied, not looking up. "But we need to be ready. Once the Queen realizes what we're doing, she'll try to stop us at all costs." Ethan glanced at the door, listening for any sounds of movement outside. The ship was silent, but he knew that silence wouldn't last long. He could feel the danger closing in, and he knew that if they didn't finish what they had started, everything would be lost. Suddenly, Zara's fingers paused over the console. "There," she said, her voice tense. "I've bypassed the main firewall. Now we can disable the Queen's access." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. They were almost there. He took a step forward, watching as Zara carefully input the final command. A soft chime echoed in the room, signaling that the system was beginning to power down. "Done," Zara said, a triumphant smile crossing her face. "The Queen no longer has control over the ship. Her power is broken." Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down, and he felt a sense of relief. They had done it. They had taken the first step toward freeing the Zalinari people from the Queen's tyranny. But that relief didn't last long. The door to the control center suddenly slammed open, and a group of Zalinari guards rushed in, their weapons raised. At the front of the group was a familiar figure, one of the Queen's most trusted lieutenants, Kyle. His eyes locked onto Ethan and Zara, his face twisted in fury. "You," Kyle shouted, "you've betrayed the Queen. Ethan's pulse quickened, and he instinctively stepped in front of Zara, trying to protect her. He knew they were outnumbered, but they couldn't give up now. Not after everything they had done. "Get ready," Zara whispered, her hand slipping into her belt, where she had hidden a small weapon. We fight for freedom." The guards advanced, but Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed a nearby piece of alien technology from the console and used it as a makeshift weapon, swinging it toward the guards. The impact sent one of them stumbling back, but the others pressed forward. Determined to capture them, Ethan and Zara fought side by side, using their wits and whatever they could find to hold off the guards. But the fight was far from over. With each passing second, more guards would arrive. They were running out of time, and the Queen's forces were closing in. "Hold them off," Zara shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "We have to finish what we started." Ethan's mind raced as he fought. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the Zalinari people, about freeing them from the Queen's control. He couldn't let her win. He couldn't let her crush the hope that had just begun to take root. As the fight raged on, Ethan realized something. He wasn't just a young human caught in the middle of an alien conflict. He was a symbol of resistance, of hope. And no matter what happened next, he wouldn't back down. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as the guards advanced, their weapons raised. The control center had become a battleground, and he was at the center of it. Zara was beside him, her eyes locked on the approaching enemy, her body poised for action. Ethan's mind raced, his thoughts moving 1,000 miles an hour as he searched for a way out of the mess they were in. Kal, the lead guard, stood at the front, his expression cold and angry. "You cannot escape," he growled, his voice echoing through the room. "The Queen's will is absolute. You will both pay for this." Ethan's grip tightened around the alien weapon in his hand. He wasn't a soldier. He wasn't trained for battle. But the fire inside him, the need to protect himself and Zara, was stronger than any fear he felt. He wasn't going to let the Queen win. Not after everything they had done. Zara moved quickly, her movements sharp and fluid as she took down one of the guards with a swift strike. The others hesitated for just a moment, but it was enough. Ethan swung the weapon he held, knocking one guard to the ground. His heart raced as he looked at Zara, who was already moving to take down another guard. The fight was chaotic, each moment a blur of movement and sound. They were outnumbered, but they weren't outmatched. "We need to get out of here," Ethan shouted over the noise, his breath coming in quick gasps. Zara nodded. "The longer we stay here, the more guards will come. We need to reach the lower levels. There's a secret escape route. It's our only chance." Ethan didn't hesitate. He turned and ran, trusting Zara to keep up. The guards were still chasing them, but they were slower now, distracted by the chaos in the control room. They rounded a corner, sprinting down another hallway, and Ethan felt the weight of their pursuit fading slightly. They were getting closer to their goal. "This way," Zara called, pointing toward a small, hidden door at the end of the corridor. It was nothing like the grand, imposing doors they had passed earlier. This one was tucked into the shadows, barely noticeable. They reached the door, and Zara quickly worked to open it. It slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into the darkness. "We have to move fast," Zara urged, glancing behind them. "We don't have much time before the entire ship is alerted." Ethan followed her down the stairs, his legs burning with each step. They were heading deep into the ship now, away from the Queen's power. Zara had told him that the escape route was well hidden, a secret only known to a few. But that also meant it wouldn't be easy to access. The stairs seemed to go on forever, winding down into the depths of the ship. The air grew colder the further they went, and the dim lights flickered above them. Ethan's mind was still racing, but he tried to focus on the task at hand. They had to get out, but more importantly, they had to stop the Queen. If they could break her control, the rest of the Zalinari people would see the truth, finally. They reached the bottom of the stairs, and Zara pushed open a thick, metal door. Beyond it was a long corridor, much darker than the others. This part of the ship was old, abandoned, and forgotten. The escape route wasn't just a way out. It was a way into the heart of the Zalinari Empire itself. "We're close," Zara said, her voice tight with tension. "This leads to a small transport shuttle. It's not much, but it'll get us off the ship." Ethan glanced around, but his attention was on the mission. The Queen's forces would be searching for them by now. Kyle wouldn't rest until they were caught. Suddenly, a loud alarm blared through the ship, followed by a robotic voice that echoed through the corridors. "Intruders detected. Lockdown initiated. All personnel report to stations immediately." Ethan cursed under his breath. The Queen knew they were escaping, and she wasn't going to let them go easily. "Move," Zara shouted, urging Ethan forward. "We're almost there." They ran down the hallway, their footsteps echoing in the silence. But the deeper they went, the more the ship seemed to change. The walls were no longer sleek and shiny. The floors were covered with dust and debris. This was the forgotten part of the ship, the part that the Queen never used, the part that didn't matter. Ethan could hear the sound of boots behind them now, growing louder as the guards began to catch up. They weren't far behind. Zara glanced over her shoulder. "We have to fight them off. If we don't, they'll catch us before we get to the shuttle." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. He didn't have much experience fighting, but he couldn't afford to think about that now. He had to act. Ahead of them, a large door loomed. It was different from the others they had passed, heavier, older. It looked like it had been there for centuries, and yet it was still functional. Zara ran toward it, her hand hovering over a panel on the wall. With a quick swipe, the door slid open, revealing a small, cramped shuttle. "Get in," Zara yelled, already inside. "I'll hold them off." Ethan hesitated for a moment. He didn't want to leave her behind, but there was no time to argue. The guards were closing in. He scrambled into the shuttle, and Zara followed, sealing the door behind them. She didn't waste a second. Within moments, the shuttle's engines roared to life, and they were moving. But as they flew away from the Zalnari ship, Ethan could see the Queen's flagship in the distance, her fleet closing in. It was far from over. They had escaped, but the real battle was just beginning. Meanwhile, aboard the Queen's ship, Queen Lyria stood on the command deck, her eyes burning with fury. The ship's control room had been compromised. Ethan and Zara had broken through the systems she had spent years perfecting. She could feel her anger rising, and the power that she had relied on was slipping away from her. "How dare they?" She spat, her voice cold with rage. "Prepare the fleet. We will not let them escape. We will hunt them down, and they will regret crossing me." The officers around her nodded, fear in their eyes. They knew the Queen's wrath all too well, but deep inside, something else stirred within her. She had never been challenged like this before. It wasn't just about regaining control of the ship anymore. It was about proving her strength, her power, her right to rule the Zalnari people. Ethan's defiance had ignited a fire in her that couldn't be put out. She would not let him go. He would be hers, whether he wanted it or not. As the shuttle raced through the darkness of space, Ethan sat in the cockpit, his hands gripping the controls tightly. Zara was beside him, her face hard and determined. They had made it this far, but they weren't safe yet. The Queen would stop at nothing to hunt them down. Ethan looked at Zara, his voice low. "Do you think we can win?" Zara's eyes met his, and for the first time since they had escaped, she smiled. "We don't have a choice," she said. "We fight, or we lose everything." Ethan nodded, knowing that she was right. The battle was just beginning. The shuttle hurtled through the dark expanse of space, its engines humming steadily as Ethan gripped the controls, his knuckles white. The stars outside were just tiny pinpricks of light, distant and cold. They were far from the Zalnari ship now, but Ethan knew that distance wouldn't save them for long. The Queen's fleet was already in pursuit, and it wouldn't be long before they were caught. Zara sat beside him, her eyes scanning the readouts on the shuttle's control panel. Her face was calm, but the tension in her posture told a different story. She was a fighter, a survivor, but even she knew they were in serious trouble. "We won't make it," Ethan said, his voice low. "Not with the Queen's fleet on our tail." Zara glanced at him, her face hardening. "We will make it. We have to. The Queen cannot be allowed to control the galaxy any longer." Ethan didn't reply. He couldn't deny that the idea of stopping the Queen's rule was noble. But he also knew they were facing an enemy unlike any they had ever known. The Zalnari Queen wasn't just a ruler, she was a force of nature. And she had already shown how far she was willing to go to maintain her control. The shuttle was a small, fast vessel, but it was nothing compared to the immense warships that made up the Queen's fleet. They were outmatched in every way. And yet, they had something the Queen didn't. Hope. How long do we have before they catch us? Ethan asked, his voice tense. Zara's eyes narrowed as she studied the monitors. Not long. Maybe an hour at most. The Queen will be relentless, but we can't outrun her forever. Ethan took a deep breath. He couldn't afford to panic. He had to think, to come up with a plan. They had escaped the Queen once, and they had the chance to do it again, but they needed a way to make sure she wouldn't keep coming after them. Suddenly, Zara turned to him, her expression intense. Ethan, I need you to trust me. We're going to do something dangerous, but it's our only chance. Ethan's eyes locked onto hers. What are you suggesting? We need to disable the Queen's fleet from the inside, she said. If we can find a way to hack into their command system, we can take control of the ships. We can turn them against the Queen. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. You're saying we can take control of her entire fleet? That's insane. Zara nodded, her gaze unwavering. It's the only way to stop her. We can't outrun her fleet, but we can use it against her. If we can disable the Queen's flagship, the rest of her fleet will follow. Ethan felt the weight of her words settle over him. It was risky. It was dangerous. But it was their best shot. How do we do it? He asked. There's a communications relay on the Queen's flagship, Zara explained. If we can hack into it, we can send a virus that will disable the ship's systems, including the command controls. The fleet will be paralyzed, and the Queen will lose her grip on them. Ethan thought for a moment. And how do we get close enough to do that? Zara's eyes sparkled with determination. We'll need to get aboard her ship. There's a hidden access port on the underside of the flagship. It's a tight space, but if we can slip past their defenses, we can board the ship undetected. Ethan didn't like it, but he knew it was their only option. All right, let's do it. The shuttle sped toward the Queen's flagship, the massive warship looming in the distance like a dark, foreboding mountain. Ethan could feel his pulse quicken as they drew closer. It was hard to believe they were about to infiltrate the heart of the Queen's power. But this was no time for second-guessing. As they neared the flagship, Zara worked quickly, coordinating the shuttle's movements to avoid detection. The flagship was surrounded by smaller ships, all of them heavily armed, and Ethan could see the flashing lights of patrols moving in formation around the ship. We're almost there, Zara said, her voice steady despite the tension. Stay close. We'll need to dock under the ship, near the access port. Ethan nodded, his hands shaking slightly as he guided the shuttle toward the bottom of the flagship. The smaller ship was barely a blip on the radar compared to the massive warship, and he could only hope they wouldn't be detected. The closer they got, the more his nerves began to fray. It felt like every minute was a countdown to disaster. He glanced at Zara, who was calmly scanning the surroundings. She was the only reason they had gotten this far, and the only reason he felt like they might just make it out alive. Now, Zara said suddenly, her voice sharp. Dock with the underside, quick. Ethan steered the shuttle toward the underside of the flagship, where a small, almost hidden docking bay waited. They passed through the ship's outer defenses without incident, and with a soft thud, the shuttle locked into place. We're in, Zara said, standing up. Let's move. They quickly gathered their gear and exited the shuttle, moving swiftly through the shadows. The inside of the flagship was cold and dark, its corridors lined with alien technology and steel. It was quiet, too quiet. Ethan felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up as they moved deeper into the ship. Stay alert, Zara whispered. We don't know how many guards are on this level. They moved carefully, using the shadows to their advantage, until they reached a large control room. Inside, a series of computers blinked with life, their screens displaying information Ethan couldn't even begin to understand. Zara quickly made her way to one of the terminals, her fingers flying across the keys. Ethan kept watch, his heart pounding in his chest. They were so close, but the danger was greater than ever. If they were caught now, They wouldn't have a chance. There, Zara said after a moment. I've bypassed the security. The virus is in. Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. They had done it. The flagship's systems were now compromised, and with it, the Queen's fleet. But just as he was about to turn to leave, the doors to the control room slammed open. Traitors. Kyle's voice boomed, his eyes filled with fury. You cannot hide from the Queen. Ethan's heart dropped. They had been caught. Zara moved quickly, grabbing a weapon from the console and firing at Kyle's guards. The air crackled with energy as the two sides collided. Ethan joined in, using the training he had learned from his time with the human military. But they were still outnumbered. We need to go, Zara shouted, her voice filled with urgency. The virus will take a minute to spread. We need to get back to the shuttle. But as Kyle stepped forward, his hand raised in command. Ethan knew they weren't going to escape without a fight. The battle was just beginning.